Welcome everyone. We will be talking about the project management process in this presentation. So this will be a very short presentation on exactly specifying the various processes, steps to project management thereby. So let us begin with the groups. Project management process groups, and what are they? They are basically five process groups that we are talking about it. Remember, project management is basically organizing and describing the work of a project. So what are those five things? They are initiating, planning, executing, monitoring and control, and perhaps closing. So these are the processes that are performed by the people, and like much of the project phases are interrelated and dependent upon the preceding phases altogether. So first and foremost is the initiating when nothing is in existence. Once the initiations take place, we start with the planning and executing. Once the planning completes, the execution takes into motion. Once the execution is been carrying out, we are continuously controlling them and monitoring them before winding up the project once it reaches the end objective. So yes, this is the process group. These are the five process groups that we are looking into: initiating, planning, executing, monitoring and controlling, and closing. So initiating is acknowledging the project or the next phase will begin. Grants been approval to commit the organizational resources to working on the project. We are looking at planning, the process of formulating, the process of revising the goals, the process of revising the objectives of the project, and creating appropriate project plans. It means we are involving alternative courses of action, selecting the best of these. Project requirements are fleshed out and the stakeholders are identified. Hence, more processes than any other project management process groups as per se. The five process groups are executing, putting the project plans into action. The project managers will coordinate, will direct the project resources at this stage to the meet the objective. Execution utilizes most of the time, most of the resources, and the costs are usually the highest one. Greatest conflicts are over the schedule, over the delays that it happens, over the delay that runs into overhead cost, increases the overhead cost, and probably runs the project into doldrums. We are thus striking to look in and put a stop into the delays via monitoring and controlling, where performance is measured, are taken, analyzed, and determined, and often sensitized to the project management managers as what is going wrong or what is the issue that might not be going as per plan. So we need to determine the variances that exist, and accordingly the project managers is expected to take the corrective actions as on when on basis, may require revisiting, may require the planning process or revamping the planning process to realign the objectives thereby. The last of the step would be closing, the most skipped process, but it's the most vital process. Brings in formal orderly end to the phase of a project itself. All the project information is gathered, everything is stored for the future references. We are talking about documentation, we are talking about collecting during the stages to be reviewed and utilized to avoid the potential problems of future projects. Contract closeout on a formal acceptance. Approvals are obtained from the project stakeholders as on when on basis. So, what are the knowledge areas? There are basically 10 knowledge areas that one must always adhere to. One is an integration management, the scope management, the time management, the cost management, the quality management, the human resource management, the communication management, the risk management, the procurement management, and last but not the least would be the stakeholder management. And if you can have the areas on this area, these 10 areas, integration between technical and the localization adaptations, we are talking about the scope of the project, we are talking about the time duration that the project needs to be completed, we need to keep a tab on the cost, the quality needs not be compromised or perhaps if possible enhanced, the human resources, how is it impacting the employees, the communication there, where is it percolating to the last man standing, the risk therefore, is there any accidents, can it be averted, the procurement management, procuring of the raw material, resource materials, and the stakeholder management. So let us define each one of them. I believe I've already elaborated into you. Knowledge areas are further been processes. There are 46 processes that we talk about it. The PMBOK is the project manager's book of knowledge, primarily covers all of these processes. And in detail, it tells you about the 46 processes that goes around it. You need to understand the concept, relate it to the input and output and the tools and technique thereby. We are talking about project managers. We are talking about the 5 phases of initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, and probably closing. So what happens with project management, integration scope, the scope management, the time management, the cost management, the quality management. This is what is present in project manager's book of knowledge, which is easily accessible on an online. We will talk about PLCs or project life cycle. The project life cycle is an agglomeration of all phases, all the 5 phases, right from initiations to the closing part. All projects are divided into phases, and all projects, large or small, have a similar life structure. These are what we are talking for. We are talking about starting the project. We are talking about organizing and preparing the project, carrying out the project work, and definitely, yes, closing of the project is what is much more important and all the more demanding. Now, characteristics of PLCs or project life cycles, they have a number of common characteristics. The ability of the stakeholders to influence the final characteristics of the project's products, and the final cost of the project is highest at the start and get progressively lower as the project continues. The cost and the staffing levels are low at the start and higher during the end and drop rapidly as the project draws to the conclusion. Here we give you a pictographical representation. If we look that as the time passes, the influence of the stakeholders more or less stabilizes and their interference comes low. But then what happens, what increases is the expenses. Expenditure, the cost that has been incurred time and again is been enhanced. So characteristics of PLC is the probability of successful completions of a project is lowest, and probably that is the reason why risk and uncertainty is the highest at the very beginning of the project. But with the passage of time, it gets reversed. The probability of successfully completion generally get progressively higher as the project continues. Did I say the passage of the time, the probability of success becomes higher and the cost does get escalated, but then the risk has been reduced by leaps and bounds. The phases of project and the project life cycle. A project life cycle is a collection of project phases that defines what work and will be performed in each phase. What deliverables will be produced, when will it be produced. So it tells you exactly what and when and who is involved in it, who is the person who is responsible for each particular phases, how much management control do you want, how much approval is to be required, how much laxity of flexibility is available at the hands of the project manager. The deliverables is a product or a service produced and provided as a part of the project thereby. We need to understand project cycle. Remember, it starts from this point as we are seeing around here. This starts from here and the point is the starting. From here we start with programming, then comes with an identification. Once we have stated what is the project that we are going around it, we then identify the resources, the key people, the key technology that needs to be identified. Formulation is how do we formulate the costing part of it, how do we deploy those technologies, how do we finance them, and then probably execute in the implementation. Once executed, the project comes to a culmination. We need to match. This is where the match comes around out here. If you look into it between what was identified and what was the end product, and this continues, goes on and on for series to come. So we have those 3 phases pictographically represented for you. On the y-axis is your cost, and on the time x-axis is the duration of the time being spent. Typically, project cost and staffing levels across the PLC as the case might be. We are talking about the initial phases, the intermediate phase, and the final phases. And you look into it, the cost increases in the initial phases. It balloons in the intermediate phases, and probably by the time we are reaching at the culmination of the project or the final phases, the cost deteriorates and absolutely becomes zero almost. So yes, we have the hands off or the transfer of technology, or probably BOT or build operate and transfer, as the case might be, depending upon the definition of the project that we have defined. It can be project phases evolve through a life cycle in a series of phases. Sequence is called hands off, or technical transfer, where we build up a project, we operate a project, and then probably transfer the ownership of a project to the management company or the other third party. The end of one phase sequentially typically marks the beginning of the next one. So face to face relationship, what are we looking at it? We are looking at a sequential relationship, an overlapping relationship, and iterative relationships. Now, in a sequential relationship is wherein a phase starts and once the previous phase is completed, or should I say, a phase completes and the next phase begins. Wherein an overlapping relationship is where the phase starts prior to the completion of the previous one. So we are overlapping with one another. Let's say I am going to build up a hospital or a resort, and probably once this construction has been built on, what will do is I will start operating upon it, and then ask a third party to either hand over the project or I would sell the project. Now, during this handover transfer of the projects of this resort, there would be a lot of hand holding as to where you're getting the waters, where are the sewage disposal, what are where the guests are going to come in, what are the raw materials are going to come in. So there might be some sort of an overlapping. Overlapping may increase the risk and probably can result in rework if people don't understand. Then we have the iterative relationship where only one phase is planned at any given point of time. Once that phase is completed, we then start planning for the next phase and is carried out with the work progress with the current phases and deliverables there. Now, this is what the project groups interact uh, in a project. If you look at an initiation groups of the group, this project is very small and doesn't have any relationship with the closing of the group. There's a complete change. The closing starts when we are almost in the middle of the group of executing process. Similarly, for planning, the planning finishes way before actually the closing comes around it. So if you look into it, there is one process, and this is the project that goes on. This is the line that goes on. And remember the level of process that goes around it. So every project, every processes, every unit can be termed on a separate basis altogether. With this, I come to an end of this presentation. Thank you for watching this presentation. I hope this presentation was an eye opener for you to understand how project management processes works around it. Thank you.